What's up, guys? Welcome back to Darth Matu's Holocron, History of the Force. Today we are going to be getting into Imperialization and the Imperial Reconquest, the period where the newly born Galactic Empire solidified its power and stamped out separatist holdouts left over from the Clone Wars. But before we dive into it, remember, check the description for links to both the Holocron, my own personal Discord, and the Praxeum. The Praxeum's website recently went live, and they are accepting members. So, if you love Star Wars Legends and you want a chance to directly participate in caring for the stories that you love, head on over there and check it out. Alright, without any more nonsense, let's get started. Imperialization was the term for the processes undertaken by the Empire to solidify control over the galaxy. The institutions of the Old Republic began to find themselves stripped away. The sector system that we have discussed in previous videos that helped to prop up the Republic during the Ruusan reformations helped to hasten its undoing. Those reforms proving ideal for Palpatine to nationalize the military. Local defense forces suddenly found themselves rolled into the newly minted Imperial Army, serving in a command structure with Emperor Palpatine directly at the head. Local navies were suddenly under the command of Imperial admirals. Each sector was placed under the command of a Moff, the new title given to the governor-generals that Palpatine had put into place during the Clone Wars. These were military governors that were tasked with ensuring the stability and the loyalty of each region. The Moffs were collected into a Moff Council, and this council answered only to Palpatine himself, and also his direct Imperial advisors. Some sectors were deemed of vital importance to the Empire, such as the Imperial Sector, which contained Coruscant, and any areas with ongoing military campaigns or special projects. These oversectors, as they were called, were overseen by a Grand Moff. Grand Moffs were appointed directly by Emperor Palpatine himself, and they had enormous authority over Imperial resources. They were some of the highest officers in the Empire, and they answered only to Darth Sidious. Secretive, vast military projects were also initiated during this time, such as the construction of the Death Star and the Dark Trooper project, each one of them directly overseen by a Grand Moff in a highly controlled oversector. And this process did not just extend to the military. Many major corporations found themselves devoured by the Empire, directly subsumed into its military-industrial complex. Quad Drive Yards is arguably one of the most famous of these companies, and their designs would lay the basis for the Imperial Star Destroyer. The Empire saw many of its military plans, including those of the Imperial Star Destroyer, distributed to companies across the galaxy, manufacturing tightly regulated by Imperial bureaucracy. Compnor, or the Commissions for the Preservation of the New Order, was created, and this was an enormous umbrella organization that oversaw a number of individual projects meant to cement Imperial control. These projects included propaganda aimed at the youth, and Compnor even included the infamous Imperial Security Bureau and Imperial Intelligence, both of which essentially acted as secret police, enforcing the will of Palpatine with a fist of Beskar. Coruscant was redubbed Imperial Center. The Galactic Senate reorganized into the Imperial Senate. Emperor Palpatine wanted the transition from Republic to Empire to be thorough and all-encompassing, and he got what he wanted. The next 10 years spent gradually erasing any trace of the Galactic Republic, culminating in the final dissolution of the Imperial Senate in 0 BBY, handing control of the galaxy directly to the Moff Council, and thus to himself. This process was purposefully drawn out, Palpatine chipping away at the old order a little at a time. At the same time, he used the massive military mobilization that had gone into the Republic's Outer Rim sieges in order to produce one of the largest military buildups that the galaxy had ever seen. The Imperial military would launch into a three-pronged campaign during 19 BBY, a coordinated strike that was meant to defeat any and all leftover resistance. the 10th Sector Army would be dispatched to destroy the remains of the Mun resistance in the Cetruic hegemony. A battle group would also be sent to engage the Foundry of the Confederacy, an area of space which was dominated by the Tion hegemony and other industrial worlds. And a third group would be sent down the Five Veils trade spine under the command of Grand Moff Octavian Grant. The campaign in the Cetruic hegemony was primarily against separatist forces who had been driven from Megiddo and Munilist at the end of the Clone Wars. The 10th Sector Army was under the joint command of Admiral Screed and General Ramadi, two veterans from the Clone Wars and staunch supporters of Palpatine. The campaign opened with the Battle of Vinsoth, where the Empire smashed separatist forces and broke into the hegemony at large. The separatists retreated to Binquaros, where General Ramadi besieged them. Admiral Screed, meanwhile, took the navy towards Bimiel, hoping to catch the Cetruics and destroy them. He succeeded in this task, absolutely crushing the enemy in an extremely lopsided engagement. The siege of Binquaros, however, did not end as well. A group of Mandalorians that had been driven into the area by Imperial operations in other areas of space attacked General Ramadi's forces from behind and lifted the siege, allowing many of the separatist leaders to escape. Screed would pursue, and he would manage to catch up to the fleeing enemy before they could escape to the unknown regions. The Imperials would attack the survivors on Vardos IV, utterly destroying any resistance in the Cetruic hegemony. Meanwhile, in the Foundry of the Confederacy, former Galactic Senator Toonbuk Tora had successfully managed to reactivate an enormous number of battle droids. Toonbuk was a Sea Murthian and had been a steadfast and public member of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. She had managed to escape from the deactivation of the droid army with a small fleet of her own, and set up an organized army and navy within the Foundry, pulling the entire sector from the galactic government. She had hoped to form an independent resistant movement, but the Empire responded by dispatching the 12th Sector Army under the command of General Jan Dodonna and Admiral Adar Talon, again two veterans of the Clone Wars and war heroes in their own right. They struck first at Charos IV, an industrial world covered in cathedral factories and a vital industrial base that Senator Tora needed. The joint efforts of the Imperial Navy and Army managed to break separatist resistance there and take the planet. The Imperials immediately took advantage of their newly gained momentum and launched an assault on the world of Diado, then leapfrogged to Metalorn. The expert tactics of Jan Dodonna secured hard-fought victories at both worlds, and Admiral Talon managed to run down Tora's flagship, killing the rogue senator when the vessel was destroyed, and securing the Empire's hold over the region. The Five Veils campaign was launched around the same time. Customs Vizier Morath Voru of the Trade Federation broke from the company and took dozens of ships with him. He established a separatist enclave at Anarch, but they proved little challenge for Moff Octavian Grant's forces. They crushed Voru at the Battle of Farstein, pursuing him down the vital Five Veils trade route and ultimately capturing the rebel executive. These early victories during the Reconquest saw a surge in Imperial patriotism back in the core, bolstering the morale of the people and building up strong support for the Imperial regime. Compnor took advantage of this, and they began to propagandize the war, hoping to portray the Empire in a more positive light. The following year, 18 BBY led to two more campaigns, the Listihall campaign and the Nulian Crisis. The Listihall campaign was led by Admiral Wolf Yularen, another hero of the Clone Wars and a master strategist. He was dispatched against the Securdians, Zagirians, and the Turvigs north of the Hydian Way. These groups had been harrying Imperial supply lines from there, and Emperor Palpatine wanted to clamp down on the region. Yularen crushed them at the Battle of Sagma before pursuing remaining holdouts to the planet of Tervissus. Tervissus would manage to hold out against Imperial aggression until 13 BBY, but the threat from the Hydian would be functionally eliminated by the end of 18 BBY. The Nulian Crisis came about as a result of the surrender of Ando to the Empire. Ando had been a firm supporter of the CIS, and the Aqualish were a fierce, warlike people. While the world had surrendered, many individuals could not accept it, and these rebel forces would launch hit-and-run attacks across the Mid-Rim, eventually seizing the worlds of Nuli and Galboron, along with several worlds within Bothan space. Imperial officer Captain Par Lankin was finally able to bring an end to the crisis by defeating Aqualish forces in the Battle of Galboron. These successes would further embolden the Empire. The battles and news of the campaigns broadcast across the HoloNet, filled with Imperial propaganda. Holodramas depicting Imperial officers in a heroic light were produced en masse, and the commanders of these forces, people like Dodana, Screed, Holt, they became household names, symbols of the New Order and the pride of the core worlds. This support would result in the amassing of Imperial forces for one last push meant to cement their control over the outer and mid-rims. Many separatist holdouts had fled to the lawless western reaches and continued to harry the Empire. The Emperor was determined to control this region, and so began the largest effort of the Reconquest. Where before the Imperial military had operated mostly in individual battle groups, this time several sector armies were brought together under the command of Moff Wilhuff Tarkin. Tarkin had command of heroes such as Dodana, Holt, Screed, and more, and he based their forces out of Eriadu. They advanced from there, launching what became known as the Western Reaches Operation, moving up the Rima trade route, defeating separatist holdouts at the Battle of Kelrodo I and the Battle of Ord Vog. Once the Rima was secured, the Imperials turned back south, moving down the Corellian trade spine, clearing out separatist enclave after separatist enclave in bitter, violent fighting. General Holt would die in the campaign, and General Ramadi would be badly injured. These battles were widely publicized in an effort that made earlier propaganda efforts seem meek in comparison, and many Imperial citizens would follow the campaign from home. Imperial forces would finally score absolute victory after the Battle of Ogath Tyr, crushing any sense of widespread separatist resistance for good and bringing an official end to the Reconquest. But the Reconquest of the Rim was not the only major military effort undertaken during this time. The Jedi Purge, otherwise known as the Second or Great Jedi Purge, was also carried out, helmed by the newly minted Darth Vader. The Purge began with the execution of Order 66, which we discussed in the previous video, but it continued for years afterwards as Vader hunted down survivors without mercy. The Jedi put up organized resistance at first, even attempting to trap and kill Darth Vader on Kessel, but the Dark Lord proved too powerful and slaughtered his ambushers. He would then proceed to use his personal stormtrooper legion, the famous 501st, to pursue Jedi remnants across the galaxy. Emperor Palpatine did not see the remaining Jedi survivors as a threat, and even counseled his apprentice to forget his hatred of their destroyed order. The Emperor had created the Inquisitorius in order to see to the remaining Jedi, a collection of Force sensitives who, while not trained as Sith, were dark-side acolytes tasked with following rumors of Jedi. Palpatine truly did not care, however, as long as Darth Vader continued to enforce the will of the Empire. And enforce it he did. Darth Vader would hunt Jedi survivors to places like Kashyyyk, killing them while at the same time helping to enslave the Wookiees for use as a labor force on projects like the Death Star. Several Jedi managed to flee to the world of Naboo, where Queen Apolana had been contemplating rebellion against the Empire for some time. She took these survivors in, and they pledged to protect her, but this action drew the eye of Darth Vader, who invaded the world with the 501st. They attacked the capital city of Theed, killing the Jedi and assassinating the Queen. Darth Vader showed no mercy in executing the Emperor's will against the office that was formerly held by his wife, and the 501st gained the name Vader's Fist after this campaign. Vader would continue putting out fires in his search for Jedi, defeating the former Separatist leader Gizor Delso, who had reactivated a droid army on Mustafar. The cloners of Kamino also rose in rebellion, cloning their own army to fight back against the Empire. Vader and the 501st helped to crush this uprising, and the Empire began to move away from clones as a result. The Imperial military created a system of academies instead, forming elite military institutions across the galaxy, on worlds like Koralag or Karita, harsh environments where they would shape Imperial citizens into elite warfighters, both in the Stormtrooper Corps and the Imperial Navy. Many famous individuals would pass through this academy system, including the likes of Han Solo and Wedge Antilles. Vader's hunt for the Jedi proved largely successful, and their order was all but extinct by one BBY, any remaining Jedi deep in hiding. There were repercussions, however. Where the Reconquest caused Imperial pride to swell, Vader's harsh actions with the 501st fomented rebellion. He committed atrocity after atrocity in his hunt, even destroying whole worlds for daring to harbor Jedi. This created deep resentment on many planets throughout the Mid and Outer Rim. Emperor Palpatine hoped to rule through fear and shows of strength, so he allowed Darth Vader to continue his campaigns. And Darth Vader was not alone in his actions. Many of the Moffs and Grand Moffs would rule their sectors in ways that benefited themselves while eschewing the needs of the people, or even committing atrocities of their own in the name of special projects. This led to a high degree of corruption within Imperial ranks, something which the Empire had been formed to clear out of the Old Republic, and the fact that many citizens of the galaxy were not ignorant of. Many of them began to operate in small groups, individual rebel cells which would eventually collate into the Rebel Alliance. But that is for our next episode, where we will discuss the famous Galactic Civil War and cover the time period of the original 3 movies. I hope you all enjoyed. I know that this one was a little bit shorter, but this is a time period in galactic history that just doesn't have a lot of information on it. Next time, however, it'll be a lot longer, as we do a breakdown of the entire Galactic Civil War. Honestly, what I think is probably a lot of people's favorite time period. But anyway, if you did enjoy, please like and subscribe. It helps me make more videos like this. Check out the description for links to the Praxeum and my own personal Discord, and please take care of yourselves out there. Be good, everybody, and may the Force break your chains.